Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining us again today. Well, we've got another pistol video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Ruger LCP Max N380. A long time ago, when I first was looking at pocket pistols, the original LCP was one of the first pistols I ever picked up. And as good as it was, I had some issues with the trigger, and it was not the most comfortable gun in the world to shoot. Now, granted, this isn't a gun that I was going to shoot tremendous amount of rounds in one sitting, but still, I wasn't impressed. So when the LCP2 came out, I didn't even really give it a look, although maybe I should have. Well, apparently Ruger has gone back to the drawing board, and with the LCP Max, not only have they given us capacity, but they've made some changes in the firearm that really are worth giving it a close look as a concealed carry pistol. And we're going to get into all that in just a minute. Alright, once again, welcome back. Thanks for being with us. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and you haven't had a chance to do so, there's something you can do that would really help us out. If you like our content, please consider subscribing. You can do that by hitting that little subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or if you're on a mobile device, you can scroll down below the video and you can hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon. It'll let you know when we do something new. It helps us out a lot, and we really appreciate it. So, the Ruger LCP Max. Like I say, once again, the original LCP I had a long time ago, and I wasn't all that impressed with this, with the original version of this gun. And it was, I loved the size, but I just felt like that it had a ways to go before it was something I was going to carry. Well, I'll show you what I did end up carrying years later, and it'll be our comparison gun for size, and that's the Glock 42. Now, if anyone watching this has got the Glock 42, or if you've got any experience with it, you can see that the Glock 42 is a much bigger pistol. Now, and I consider the Glock 42 a pretty small gun. Now, I carry it in a variety of different ways. I pocket carry this a lot, and I also have some inside the waistband holsters for it, both in leather and Kydex, which kind of gives you an idea of how often I carry that little gun, because I really like it. Well, this package is so incredibly small, it's definitely something that I have to consider now. We get into specifications, I'm going to really let you know, but just kind of for comparison purposes, you know, the standard capacity of this gun is 10+1. This is 6+1. There's also a 12-round mag available for this little Ruger. So with their standard magazines, you get 4 more rounds in the Ruger, and look how much smaller it is. Okay, so you can look at the length and you can see that the Ruger is a much smaller gun. I do want to point out the trigger guards are very similar in size. A lot of people don't care about that, but to me this is kind of a big deal, especially in a smaller gun where they tend to chop away at the trigger guard. You know, I've got medium to large size hands, and whenever I have a smaller pistol like this, sometimes those little tiny trigger guards slip, you know, just slipping your finger transitioning into that trigger guard is not as quick and easy on a little tiny trigger guard. But this is really good. You can get right in there, and I don't feel awkward getting my finger in there when I need to. So it was put together pretty well, I think. If you look at it, you can see that the width is very similar. The Ruger is just a hair thinner than the Glock. And of course, looking at it from the back, you can see the length. Ruger's just slightly smaller with its standard magazine than the Glock with its standard magazine. And then of course there's your sight picture for both guns. I want you to keep this in mind for whenever we talk about the features section. Of course the Ruger's on the left, the Glock's on the right, and you can see the difference in the sight picture. We'll come back to that, like I said. But overall, the Ruger is much smaller than the Glock in every way. So if you're used to carrying something like the Glock 42 and you're very comfortable with it, well, you can already tell that something like this is going to be very easy to go in the pocket or any other type of holster, and should be very comfortable. Alright, it's time to jump into the features, but of course, before we do, we want to take a minute and thank our friends over at Don's Weaponry for providing us with this beautiful example of this Ruger LCP Max for our tabletop review today. Don's Weaponry is a huge supporter of firearms safety and education, and we can't thank them enough for their support. All right, so Let's do a quick safety check on the firearm here. Let everybody know that everything is good. You can see that there is nothing in the chamber. We are empty, and of course we have an empty magazine here. So we're going to put that back and have a look here. So like I said, the very first thing that we need to talk about is the capacity. So the LCP here, this is a 10+1 capacity with the standard magazine. There is a 12-round magazine. Of course, it has a small extension available. I don't have one of those here for you today, but like you might expect, it just continues the texture like many of these little extended mags. It looks like it's just, artistically continues the look of the grip all the way down. Of course, it is going to add a little bit of length, and so it's going to be a little bit bigger overall with that, which may not make any difference because you may just want to carry it with the standard magazine. And the reason I think you might want to do that, you've seen all these micro pistols coming out with better capacities. And the way everyone's been doing this, if you look at this magazine design, notice how it tapers toward the top there. You kind of have this, double stack and a half thing going. Well, this is how a lot of people have gotten this extra capacity out of these smaller guns. Instead of being a single stack, they have a narrow magazine where the rounds actually sit offset until they get to the top, and so they're able to gain a really good round count by going just a little bit wider with the magazine. And of course the magazine can be made of thinner steel to where they don't have to affect the width of the handgun that much in order to do that. So that's a pretty nice package. So let's just kind of go over from top to bottom here. So let's look at the sights first. Now, what they've done, I was actually pretty impressed that they gave you a night sight on the front. Now, I would have been a lot happier if they just went ahead and gave you night sights on the rear as well, because a lot of people will tell you, well, the front sight's the only one that's really important, or that's where you need to put your focus on the front sight. That's true, but if you're in low light conditions like they talk about, your rear sight can very easily block your front sight, and just a slight amount of movement, like if you're in the dark and it's really low light conditions and you have your front sight positioned and you can't exactly see where your back sight is positioned, you can see how far off the target you can be very quickly. And just by comparison, the Glock, I've got a standard set of Trijicon night sights on here, and as you can see, because I can see all 3 points here, I can get these lined up in the dark very easily. And it's just something to think about. I'm not saying that this is not good because, ideally, and I've mentioned this before, if it's so dark in your shooting conditions that you really have to rely 100% on your night sights to take a shot, it's probably too dark to be shooting anyway. So it may not ever be a deal breaker for you, but for me, I'd prefer to have it all the way around. I'm not a really big fan of just unpainted, these little U-channel notch sights. I'm just not a fan. I like to have 3 dots. It's just me, but not bad. I'm glad they included that because I think that's pretty awesome. So you've got front and rear serrations, and they are pretty beefy. You can feel those with no problems whatsoever. So your trigger. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the trigger until we get to the range section, but the original LCP that I had, the trigger was just absolute garbage as far as I was concerned. I just didn't feel like I could take one consistent shot with it after another. And with this one, it comes back, there's a decent amount of pressure, and then there's a solid break in that trigger, and then the reset is actually not bad. It's a little longer than some of your SRT trigger type setups, but it's pretty consistent. And that's what I really look for, is consistency in a trigger. And so I think they've really made a big difference on this, just looking at it. And of course, we get to the range section, I'll tell you how that plays out. So, of course, you got your magazine release right here, and it just spits that thing right on out of there, so that works pretty good. You've got your slide release here, okay? And if you take a look, you can see the texturing in the grip, they've kind of broken this up with a pattern, but they use the same grip texture all the way around front and the rear. And it's pretty nice. This is the same kind of texturing that you see on a lot of your little SIGs and some of these other little guns. It's becoming very popular. It's nice, but it's not uncomfortable. And then the other thing that I noticed right off the bat when I picked this up, it feels, compared to the LCP, this one feels like the grip is a little, just overall, it just feels a little more substantial, a little bit beefier. So I don't feel like I'm holding a toy gun in my hand. It's small, but it feels pretty solid. So it's got a pretty decent set of features overall. You know, it's under 11 ounces. It's less than 1 inch wide. The trigger seems to have a pretty good break and reset on it. You do have the 12-round magazine available if you want it. That magazine catch, by the way, is reversible if you want to. You can switch that around, so if you're a lefty, you can put that on the other side. And like I say, it's got good texturing, and I was also impressed that they give you a front night sight. For me, that'd be the one thing I'd change, would just be having a rear as well. But it's still very good that they gave you that. So that's a pretty impressive set of features on that little gun. Okay, so let's get into the range report. So, if you'll remember, I mentioned that when I had the original LCP that I wasn't a big fan of the trigger, and I wasn't a real big fan of how it felt to shoot. Granted, if you have a small pistol like this, I don't care what kind, whether it's a 380 or a 9mm, if you shoot any significant number of rounds through the pistol, you're definitely going to feel it. But I just felt like the original LCP was just not comfortable at all. So I was a bit surprised whenever I shot this gun, because I don't know what they did. I don't know what specific changes that they've made. Now, they call this trigger that's in this one the secure action trigger. It's supposed to have a short, smooth pull, clean break, and a positive reset. That's per Ruger. I will say this much. The trigger is much more consistent on the LCP Max than my LCP was. That is for sure. It's not even a contest. And the gun's a lot more comfortable to hold in your hand. Like I said, I feel like that the grip, I believe it's quite a bit beefier than it was on the original version. So when I hold this firearm, it's a small gun, but it doesn't feel quite as small as the other one did when I shot it. Now, I was also concerned about it being picky with ammo, because that's another thing I forgot to mention, that my original LCP was really picky. It shot range ammo okay, but it got really finicky when it came to some of the defensive rounds I put through it. So I started off with Blazer Brass and SMB as far as shooting this, and I moved on to the defensive ammo, but let me show you what it does like for sure. The Hornady Critical Defense, now this is the 90 grain. No problems with this whatsoever. Like I say, I shot at least a full box of each of these with no problem. So the Hornady did well. I've also got this Remington. This is the 102 grain Ultimate Defense. No problems with this one. And then of course I had some Federal Premium, and you can see there's just a little bit of that left, but this is the 90 grain HydroShock. You may be familiar with the HydroShocks. They've been around for a long time. So using some pretty well-known and pretty popular defensive rounds, the firearm performed really well. I was really impressed with the level of comfort shooting this pistol. Now, I shot a lot more rounds than I would normally shoot at one time in a gun this size, just because, you know, to get through all this testing, to test all these different rounds plus range ammo, you got to shoot a lot of rounds to make sure it's not a fluke between one or the other. And I really thought I was going to be uncomfortable by the time I did all that, but I wasn't. It was pretty nice. So my experience shooting this little handgun was much, much better than my original LCP. And now, let's talk about performance as far as on paper. You need to have realistic expectations, okay? This is a tiny handgun, and when you have a little small barrel like this, I don't care how much training you have or how good of a shot you are. Don't expect to be a marksman with a gun like this. Now, at defensive range, and for me, I always declare that as about 21 feet. That's how I train defensively. At 21 feet with this gun, no matter which ammo I had in it, I was getting close to little 2-inch groups. Wasn't doing much better than that. But like I say, the sights on this gun, for me, that's the only thing that I think is a weak point, is I'd like to have that rear sight to be at least a dot sight, even if it wasn't a glow sight like the front. If they would just paint this rear sight with 2 white dots, I think it would make a big difference. But I figure a 2-inch group is good enough because, once again, it's a defensive gun. And in the unfortunate and hopefully very unlikely event that I would ever need to pull this gun out to use it, I think that performance would be good enough to keep me alive and get the job done. So, very impressed with its performance. Much, much easier to shoot than its predecessor. Much more comfortable to shoot. And extremely reliable and repeatable performance. So what's it like to carry the Ruger LCP Max? Well, once again, this is what I would definitely classify as a pocket gun. And they actually give you, among your stuff that comes with the gun, they give you a little pocket holster here. And it's pretty basic. It's a little kind of semi-stretchy little nylon deal here. And when you have it in your pocket, it does have this little paddle here to help orient it and keep it straight up in your pocket. And that's not a bad way to go. And this is very similar to what I normally would use for a gun like this anyway, which would be something like either the little DeSantis gun hide. This is the one from the 42, but just to give you an idea of how it works, I carry the 42 in this routinely. And it's a great little holster because of the orientation, I think. It's very easy to work with. And they stay put pretty well. Those are great. And of course, another option that I use a lot for stuff like this is the sticky. Now, to me, it seems like when I talk to people, there's definitely 2 schools of thought on sticky holsters. People either love them or they hate them. And Sticky doesn't pay me a dime to talk about their holsters, so if you see them a lot, that's not why. It's because I actually own them. I probably own 30 of these things. Because what I actually end up doing when I buy a pistol, I usually buy one of these for it no matter what. Because when I store them, when I keep pistols stored, you can have them, sit side by side in their little protected sticky holster, and you can protect the finish on your firearm if you have to stack a long row of them in a safe or whatever. But it also gives it an individual holster, so if you get ready to grab the gun, it's already got a holster. You don't have to look for one to match up with the gun. That's kind of my thinking behind that. Now, keep in mind, once again, I'm only advocating using something like this on a small gun like this. If it's a small, light firearm, I think this is a good way to go, either in the pocket or in the waistband. This material does what it's supposed to do. When you cinch your pants and jeans or your khakis, whatever you're going to wear, when you cinch that belt line up over this, it does stay put. And it is a secure way to carry the firearm. I wouldn't do that with one of these on a larger gun just because there's too much weight, too many things can go on. But with these smaller ones, it works really well. So I used both this one and I tried their holster as well in the pocket over the course of several days. I actually ended up going with the sticky just because I'm so used to them and I'm so comfortable and they're so versatile. I can either pocket carry or go straight to the waistband, know that's going to stay put. And plus these things are, they're relatively inexpensive to buy. You just have to check various resources, but they're a good little holster. It's not a huge investment, and it makes the gun carry very well. It's so light and so comfortable that it doesn't really matter what kind of holster you put this thing in. It's one of those things that I forgot it was even there. And if you really want to know what the test of a comfortable firearm is, that's it. So overall impressions of the Ruger LCP Max. Well, the gun has a lot of good things going for it. The overall feel of the gun in your hand. It feels like it was made very well. It feels to me like it's a much better firearm than the LCP, which was my first experience with their smaller gun. And it's been a while since I've shot the LCP, but I can definitely tell a difference in all the improvements they've made in this firearm. Plus, of course, you know, you've got the extra capacity because of the design of the magazine, which is how a lot of people are doing that these days. It's got a good trigger that's pretty consistent. Overall performance with various ammunition was really, really good. Like I said, it did not have a problem with any of the defensive rounds that I used in it, and the range ammo, including Winchester white box, Blazer brass, about 3 total, I think, that I used in it. And it wasn't picky with any of the ammunition that I shot. So what you got to ask yourself, you know, we featured some smaller pistols before, and some are higher end pistols, you know, that cost you $700, $800, $900. MSRP on the LCP Max is around $449. 10+1 with available 12+1 with this trigger and this level of comfort makes this a really good value, I think. And I think that Ruger has come a long way with the improvements that they've made in this pistol. Once again, my personal observation, the only thing I would really change would be what they give you as far as a sight. I'm glad that they gave you a glow sight for the front, but at the very minimum, I'd like to see like a 2-dot white sight in the rear. If not, just go ahead and make it a glow sight as well. And that would make this thing absolutely perfect. But for the price point, I'm pretty impressed that you get a glow sight with it to begin with. So if you're looking for a pocket gun and you want something that's a serious contender, well, the LCP Max gives you performance, it gives you a good trigger, it's comfortable, and it gives you capacity all at the same time, and it does it for around $449. So it's a good offering from Ruger, so it's definitely worth a look. Okay, well, that is going to do it for today. We appreciate you being with us, of course, as always. We'll be back very soon with another video for you. So until that time, everybody be safe and have a great day. Thank you.